He stood in that courtroom, calm as stone, until the judge called him a disgrace. Jason Statham, once a decorated federal investigator, now forced to defend the innocent from behind a private desk, just got publicly humiliated by the one man everyone's too scared to question. "You're out of your league, Mr. Statham." The judge sneered. Jason didn't flinch. He smiled, because in exactly 7 minutes, the gavel would fall in a very different way. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. Jason Statham didn't need a badge to chase justice anymore. He'd left the bureau 2 years ago, walked out after watching a whistleblower case get buried under a mountain of red tape and political smiles. Since then, he'd worked out of a one-room office above a coffee shop in a quiet downtown strip where nobody asked too many questions. And that was how he liked it. But this case was different. Her name was Monica, a waitress, barely 30. Her son was 7. Smart, shy, loved dinosaurs. She came to Jason because everyone else had failed her. She didn't know legal terms, couldn't afford a good lawyer, and had no chance against a man trying to take her child. Her ex, a wealthy investment broker with friends in high places, including Judge Halverston. Jason didn't care about titles. What caught his attention was the pattern. Monica wasn't the first mother to lose custody under Halverston's gavel. 5 cases in 7 months, each with mysteriously missing reports from social workers who later left the state or went silent. Every time, the father came out on top, always a man with connections, always the same legal firm. Jason started digging. Quietly, he'd learned long ago that the louder you are, the easier you are to stop. And when he found the original home evaluation report from Dr. Evelyn Miles, the one that mysteriously never made it to trial, he knew he was looking at something deeper than a custody fight. He was looking at a machine. And Judge Halverston was the man pulling its levers. Jason didn't believe in accidents anymore. Not when a report this detailed, this damning, had been completely erased from the court's digital system. Not when 3 different employees swore they never saw it. Not when one clerk whispered, "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to," and walked away without another word. So he built the case. He reconstructed Monica's entire family history, gathered every piece of paper, every email, every call log. He tracked campaign donations to Halverston's re-election fund, traced financial ties to Monica's ex, and even discovered a hidden bank account in the Caymans connected to a shell company based in Delaware. It wasn't a case anymore. It was a sting operation. But Jason knew the courtroom wasn't his turf. Not really. He wasn't a lawyer, and he didn't pretend to be. The judge would use that against him, mock him, discredit him. That was fine, because Jason wasn't planning to win with arguments. He was planning to win with proof. The night before the hearing, Jason stood in his office, staring out the window. The city was quiet. People were living their lives, unaware of what tomorrow would expose. Behind him, the files sat in neat stacks, one for evidence, one for testimonies, one for backup plans. He didn't need to rehearse. He'd lived this fight before. Only this time, he wasn't walking in as a federal agent. He was walking in as a man with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. Monica had called to thank him earlier that night, said she couldn't sleep, said she was scared. Jason listened, let the silence do most of the talking. And when she started crying, he said just one thing: "You'll leave that courtroom with your son. I'll see to it." The next morning, he wore a gray button-down shirt, black slacks, no tie, no badge, no backup, just a folder under his arm and steel behind his eyes. He walked into the courthouse like he was walking into a storm, and in a way, he was, because Judge Halverston didn't just control the verdict, he controlled the narrative. And for years, no one had dared challenge it. But then Jason Statham showed up. He took his seat at the front, beside Monica. She was shaking. He placed a hand on the table, steady, calm, and nodded once. She breathed. The courtroom filled slowly. Reporters, lawyers, a few regulars who liked to sit on trials just to feel something. The judge entered. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. Jason looked up, and so it began. The courtroom settled into a tense silence, the kind that hums just beneath the surface. polished wood, heavy robes, and too many eyes watching with too little courage. Jason sat still. His folder rested on the table, unopened. Monica sat beside him, wringing her hands, eyes flicking between the judge and her ex-husband, who lounged confidently behind his attorney like he already knew the outcome. Judge Halverston didn't look at Jason when he opened the docket. He didn't need to. The power in the room had already been tilted, quietly, deliberately, toward the side with more money, more pull, more influence. The judge's voice was deep and practiced. This is a custody review between Monica Ray and Kyle Weston. Presenting for Ms. Ray, Mr. Jason Statham. Not a lawyer, but approved to represent under Pro-SE protocols. Noted, the jab was subtle, legal, but laced with condescension. Jason raised his eyes. Appreciate the reminder, Your Honor. That earned a few chuckles in the gallery. The judge didn't smile. Jason stood, opened the folder. I'd like to submit a sworn evaluation from Dr. Evelyn Miles, certified family therapist and state-appointed investigator. This report was filed 6 weeks ago, but never entered into case records. The judge barely glanced at it. Irrelevant. The court has already received the Department of Child Services assessment. With respect, sir, Jason continued, voice level, that assessment was based on outdated interviews and altered testimony. This report includes photo evidence, time-stamped logs, and a full psychological review of both parties. It directly contradicts the conclusions in the official file. Mr. Statham, the judge interrupted sharply. This is a custody review, not a conspiracy trial. You're here to defend a mother's rights, not cross-examine court. Jason let the silence sit. He slid the report closer. I am defending her rights. And I'm not accusing the court. Not yet. The judge's eyes narrowed. Jason turned to Monica's ex-husband. Mr. Weston, could you tell the court where you were on April 3rd at 6:15 p.m.? Kyle Weston shifted in his seat. His attorney immediately objected. Withdrawn, Jason said coolly, the location's already in the phone records, along with a bank transfer, from Mr. Weston to an account linked to a law clerk in this very courthouse. The judge banged his gavel. Enough. That's borderline slander, and you know it. Jason stepped forward slowly, both hands on the edge of the table. What I know, Your Honor, is that your gavel's not going to protect you from the truth forever. A stillness dropped like a weight. The judge leaned forward, cold and deliberate. Let me explain something to you, Mr. Statham. You are a former federal agent with no license to practice law. You're a man who couldn't follow the rules, and now you're pretending that breaking them makes you noble. But you're not. You're a man with a hero complex. And men like you, he paused, made sure everyone was watching, are exactly why the system is broken. Monica let out a small gasp beside him. Jason didn't blink, didn't flinch. Then, slowly, deliberately, he looked down at his watch. 7 minutes. That's how long it would take. 7 minutes until everything this judge thought was safe, hidden, and untouchable would be laid bare. Jason straightened. Funny thing about broken systems, Your Honor, you keep shaking the wrong pieces. Eventually the whole thing falls down. The judge sat back, clearly trying to regain control, but the room had already shifted. Something in the air had cracked. The kind of crack that doesn't make noise, but moves people. Jason turned, looked over the gallery, saw the clerk pretending not to listen, the bailiff tapping his boot, the reporter scribbling faster now. Everyone felt it. Something was coming. He returned to his seat beside Monica. Stay calm, he whispered to her. The hard part's almost over. But what he didn't say, what he couldn't say yet, was that the hard part wasn't the trial. The hard part was the truth, and it was about to come crashing through the courtroom like a tidal wave. The judge's face was stiff with barely hidden rage, but Jason had already moved on. He didn't need the man's approval. He needed time. And now, with the whole courtroom caught in the awkward silence that always follows an exposed nerve, Jason began the second act of his plan. He stood again, this time not addressing the judge, but the courtroom itself. I'd like to ask a few procedural questions, he said calmly, as if this were the most routine hearing in the world. To clarify court record inconsistencies. The judge narrowed his eyes. You will not use this courtroom for theatrics. Jason's voice stayed cool. No theatrics, sir. Just facts. He turned to the court clerk, a woman in her 30s who looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. Ms. Langley, could you confirm whether the family report from Dr. Miles was ever time-stamped into the system? She froze. The room watched her breathe. I don't recall seeing it, she muttered. Jason stepped closer. Not asking if you recall. I'm asking if you scanned it. Logged it. You're the gatekeeper of this docket. Either it's there or someone deleted it. She stared down at her screen, hands trembling just enough to make the keys click slower than usual. It's not here. Jason turned slowly to the gallery. So a court-mandated report with verified signatures was delivered and then vanished. He didn't need to say more. The room was catching on. Next, he addressed the opposing counsel. Mr. Bennett, you submitted a motion to seal the Weston financial documents. Can you explain why you redacted line items related to Judge Halverston's campaign donations? The attorney objected. The judge overruled the question immediately, voice now tight and fast. Irrelevant to the custody issue. Strike it. Jason smiled. Then he reached into his folder and pulled out a sealed envelope. This, he said, lifting it slightly, isn't evidence. Not yet. It's insurance. Inside are transcripts of phone calls, wire transfers, and one very specific voicemail from a former courthouse employee. I haven't submitted them yet, because the people involved deserve a chance to do the right thing first. The judge shifted in his seat. Jason placed the envelope on the desk. Let me tell you a story, he said, this time to the entire courtroom. 2 years ago, a woman named Rachel Cortez lost custody of her daughter in this very courtroom. The father had no job, a record, and no alibi for a reported domestic call filed 2 weeks prior. The mother had a clean record, no red flags, and yet she lost. The gallery murmured. Someone whispered Rachel's name like it was a ghost. Jason continued, steady and clear. She died last year. Suicide. Left a letter blaming the court system. Blaming you, Your Honor. The judge slammed the gavel. You're done here, Statham. One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt. Jason stared at him. Then he said the one line that changed everything. Then hold me, but before you do, you should know you've been recorded since the moment you stepped into this courtroom. The judge blinked. Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. Set it gently on the desk. A flash drive. For the record, he said, this includes a conversation held in your chambers last Friday at 4:13 p.m. In that conversation, the child's father offered you a financial incentive, and you accepted. The room collapsed into gasps. The judge's hand hovered above the gavel, unsure whether to silence the room or himself. Jason pressed forward. I've also taken the liberty of having that same recording streamed to a secure email server. A copy's already with the Justice Department. One's with the Inspector General. And another, he nodded toward the back of the room, is with the man sitting in the third row, middle seat. Former Special Agent Mason Dorsey. FBI. All eyes turned. The man stood up, silent, watching. The judge paled. Jason leaned in, voice now barely above a whisper. You said I don't belong here. You're right. I don't. But she does. He nodded toward Monica, who was frozen in place, eyes wide, hands clasped to her chest. Jason turned back to the judge. And today you answered to her. The courtroom didn't erupt. It went still. The kind of stillness that only happens right before a building falls down. The courtroom was silent, but it wasn't peaceful. It was a silence of exposed nerves and held breath. A silence that had weight to it. Judge Halverston didn't speak right away. His hand stayed frozen near the gavel, but he didn't bring it down. Couldn't, because everything had just shifted. The walls he'd built, the procedural tricks, the silence of staff, the favor trading, were suddenly see-through, fragile, and everyone could see the cracks. Jason Statham took one small step forward, not aggressive, not confrontational, just measured, like a man who already knew how this ended. You're not the only one who's been watching, Your Honor. From the gallery, A figure stood up, a man in a dark blue blazer, clean-shaven, with sharp, focused eyes. He didn't say a word, just walked calmly toward the front of the room. A badge briefly flashed at his hip as he passed the last row. Former Special Agent Mason Dorsey, Jason's old partner. And right now, the living proof that this wasn't some desperate stunt. It was a coordinated takedown. Agent Dorsey, Jason said, "You reviewed the recordings?" Mason nodded once. Confirmed, date stamped, admissible, and already shared with Internal Affairs. The judge stood suddenly, a sharp scrape of wood against tile. "This is outrageous. This entire proceeding has been compromised by theatrics and illegal surveillance." Mason's voice was calm but firm. "Actually, sir, it's been preserved. If you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't be sweating." The judge reached for his gavel, but the bailiff moved first. A quiet shuffle, a small, firm motion, and suddenly, the gavel wasn't in the judge's hand anymore. It had been set aside. Jason watched it happen, not with satisfaction, but with purpose. "You've ruled over this courtroom for 12 years, Jason said, voice low. "You made people believe they had no options, that fighting back was hopeless, that your word was final." He turned to the gallery. "To the rest of you sitting here, clerks, lawyers, even you, Mr. Bennett, how many times did you look away? How many cases did you bury because it was easier than asking questions?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The room was thick with guilt. Jason opened the folder one last time, pulled out a second document. This one a formal request to vacate all previous rulings made under Halverston's bench in the last 18 months. Signed by the District Oversight Board. Pre-approved, pending federal confirmation. The judge stared at it, jaw tight. "You forged that," he spat. Jason laid it gently on the bench. "Sworn, sealed, and logged this morning. You know how I operate. Quiet first. Loud only when it matters." Suddenly the doors at the back of the courtroom opened again. 2 more agents entered, this time in full DOJ attire. Their presence wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. The judge stepped back, tried to regroup, trying to find control. "I'll have your license for this," he snapped. "You're finished." Jason didn't blink. "I don't have a license, and I've been finished before. But you," he took one step closer, "you're done for first time." The agents approached the bench. Judge Robert Halverston. One of them said, reading from a folded document, "You are under investigation for judicial misconduct, bribery, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud." The courtroom let out a collective breath. Not gasps, not shock, relief. Jason turned to Monica. Her hands were over her mouth, eyes red. But this time, she was smiling behind the tears. The judge tried to speak again, tried to shift blame, accuse, explain. But every word only buried him deeper. Every protest landed like dust hitting steel. Jason walked over to the bailiff, whispered something. The bailiff nodded. The courtroom doors locked. No one left. No one interrupted. Because what they were witnessing wasn't a trial anymore. It was a reckoning, and it was right on time. If you were Jason in that moment, watching a man who insulted you fall apart, would you feel triumph or something deeper? Let us know in the comments. The judge's robe no longer carried weight. It clung to him now like guilt, wrinkled, heavy, irrelevant. He stood alone at the bench, flanked by 2 agents, his face twisting between rage and desperation. Jason Statham didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched, calm, steady, unmoved. Halverston's voice cracked first. "This is a setup," he barked, jabbing a finger toward Jason. "He's not even a lawyer. He manipulated the court. This is a vendetta. He came here to destroy me." Jason's reply was quiet. "No, Judge. You did that yourself." The courtroom didn't react with cheers or applause. This wasn't a movie scene. This was justice, slow, raw, and real. Jason stepped forward, walking past the desk where Monica sat holding back tears. Her hands were clenched, but her shoulders had finally dropped. The weight was lifting. He stood just feet from Halverston now. "I didn't do this for revenge," he said, eyes locked. I did it because people like Monica lose everything while you shake hands behind closed doors. The agents asked the judge to step down. He didn't. Not right away. You think this ends with me? Halverston hissed, voice lower now, almost whispering. You think you won something? Jason stared, didn't budge. No, he said. You're just the start. The judge's eyes flicked around the room. The reporters, the lawyers, the clerks who had always nodded yes, always looked the other way. Now, they couldn't even meet his gaze. He was no longer the man who walked in wearing power like armor. He was just a man now, a man whose mask had cracked. The handcuffs clicked. Sharp, clean. The judge was escorted from the bench for the first time in his career, not as a symbol of authority, but as a man accused. Each step echoed through the chamber, and as he passed Jason, he stopped. Just for a second. You think people will remember this? He sneered. They'll forget. They always forget. Jason's reply came like a blade. Not this time. He turned back to Monica, walked to her slowly, sat beside her. For a moment, the courtroom faded, and all that was left was a mother and a man who kept his promise. It's over, he said softly. She couldn't speak, just nodded through the tears. Across the room, Mason Dorsey leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Their eyes met. Jason gave a short nod. Mason returned it. Flashback fragments rolled silently through Jason's mind. Late nights at the office, going over transcripts. Whispers from frightened clerks who feared for their jobs. That voicemail, Halverston's voice confirming everything. He'd built this moment one brick at a time. Quietly, carefully, one woman's case had become something far bigger. Jason stood, picked up his folder, tucked it under his arm. The judge was gone. The gavel was still. And the room? It was different now. Not cleaner, not healed, but aware, awake. As he reached the back, one of the younger clerks stood up, nervously. Mr. Statham, she said. He turned. Thank you. Jason didn't say a word, just nodded. Outside, the sun hit the concrete like a spotlight. A line of news vans had already formed. Reporters were setting up, microphones out, cameras aimed. He didn't slow down. A few of them tried calling out to him. Jason, is it true? Were you working with the DOJ from the start? Did you know this would happen today? He just kept walking, because it didn't matter who got credit. The only thing that mattered was that a child got to go home to his mother, and a corrupt man finally answered for the lives he tried to destroy. The courthouse was still behind him, but Jason Statham didn't look back. He walked alone, the way he always did after something ended, not because he didn't care, but because endings were never the part he held on to. Not the press, not the applause, not even the thank yous. What mattered had already happened. Justice wasn't about a verdict. It was about peace. And someone finally had it. Monica stood outside with her son in her arms. The boy gripped her tightly, like if he let go, it might all disappear again. Jason watched from across the plaza. He didn't approach. This wasn't his moment. But then the boy looked up, spotted him. Jason gave him a small nod, the kind of nod that says, "You're safe now." The boy smiled, just barely, and that was enough. Jason walked on. Back at his office, the same one above the corner coffee shop, he dropped the folder onto his desk. The file was done now, closed. He slid it into a cabinet filled with a dozen other names. Small lives, big fights. He poured himself a glass of water, sat in silence, let the quiet settle around him like a familiar friend. Then he opened his email. There it was, a message from the Justice Department. Case confirmed. Judge Halverston remanded without bail. Official inquiry launched into all cases under his jurisdiction. Jason didn't smile, but he did exhale, long and slow. He picked up the phone and dialed. "Mason," he said, "it's done." On the other end, a pause. Then, "You sure you're not ready to come back in?" Jason looked at the stack of folders waiting to be opened. "No," he said. "I'm exactly where I need to be." He hung up. There was a framed quote on his wall, just a piece of scrap paper tacked up with a thumbtack years ago. Most people wouldn't even notice it, but Jason did. Every day, it read, "The law belongs to the people." He stared at it now, thinking about what that really meant. The law wasn't supposed to be a weapon for the powerful. It wasn't supposed to be twisted behind doors and locked inside backroom deals. It was meant to protect the quiet, the small, the ones who don't get heard. And as long as Jason Statham still had breath in his body, that's exactly what it would do. Outside, the sun had started to dip below the rooftops. The city was still moving, still grinding forward like it always did. But in one little courtroom, on one ordinary day, something had changed. And that was enough. For now, there are battles you see and battles you don't. Most people never notice the quiet wars waged in courtrooms, where a sentence can tear a family apart, and a single ruling can change the course of a life. No explosions, no sirens, just ink, paper, and power. Jason Statham fights those battles, not with a badge anymore, not with a gun, but with something far more dangerous, conviction. Because the truth is, justice doesn't roar. It whispers. It hides behind polished smiles and perfect diction, behind men in robes who talk about fairness while cashing checks beneath the table. But Jason sees them, and he doesn't look away. He's not a hero. He doesn't want to be. Heroes get statues. Heroes get headlines. Jason? He gets the job done, then disappears. That's the way he likes it. You won't find his name on courtroom plaques. You won't hear it mentioned in city council meetings. But you will feel the ripple, the shift, the space where corruption used to live, now left hollow and exposed. Because every time someone like Jason takes a stand, something happens. The system flinches. The liars retreat. And for one brief, vital moment, the innocent win. Monica's son will grow up with his mother. That doesn't make Jason a legend. It makes him necessary. In a world where too many good people are silenced by red tape, threatened by status, or crushed under the weight of power abused, Jason is a quiet answer. Not loud, not proud, just relentless. Because he knows the real villains wear suits. They drink from glass tumblers and speak in legal jargon. They shake hands while they steal. But Jason Statham? He speaks one language, truth. And when the powerful forget who the law was meant to serve, he reminds them